Movies! Okay, Star Wars. So here's the thing. I was a very big Star Wars fan growing up. Not like a huge one. I didn't really go on Wikipedia or, buy tons of merchandise or anything like that. Although I did have these little Star Wars Micro Machine toys as a kid, and that was kind of fun because I also had Jurassic Park toys and Power Ranger toys, and they were all kind of the same scale, but then the Star Wars toys are really tiny, and there's kind of this fun idea when mixing them all together that like, oh yeah, Star Wars happened a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Maybe everything was at, 1/10 scale for them. And so it was always fun to mix and match that kind of stuff. But I remember seeing Star Wars as a kid. I saw the special editions. I just this week saw the non-special editions for the first time. We found a couple kind of bootleg copies of those. And they blew my mind as a kid. Lightsabers, land speeders, X-Wings, TIE fighters, the lasers. Visually, it was just a huge treat. And so to prepare for The Force Awakens, here's the thing, we really didn't hype ourselves up about it. Liz and I we weren't like, the people waiting in line for 3 days for The Phantom Menace or anything like that. We were pretty young. I think I was 13 or something like that. Liz was probably 14. Obviously, we didn't know each other then. Although, maybe we did. No, I don't think we knew each other yet. But even as a kid, I remember coming out of The Phantom Menace being like, that was not very good. And thinking like, the lightsaber battles were cool, Darth Maul was cool, but I didn't care about anything. And, considering that I think George Lucas's big defense of the prequels is like, well, it's kids' movies. We're aiming for kids. The fact that as a 13-year-old I still found it to be really boring and inane, maybe says something. But because of that, we decided to really not get hyped up about Force Awakens. We didn't buy tickets in advance or anything like that. We're basically saying like, okay, if it's good, it'll be great, and we'll find a way to see it. If not, then we're not gonna, be sad about it. So then the scores came out, almost universally praised. It had like a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes the other week. A lot of people were saying it's a great return to form, that Star Wars felt like Star Wars again. And so I got a little bit excited, and I was like, okay, we should see this. So in preparation, we watched all the despecialized editions of the original movies, which, my God, like a lot of things that I assumed had been digitally enhanced in the special editions really weren't. There's some incredible shots in those first three movies, coming out in the 70s and the 80s that really still hold up. I mean, the one that comes to mind right off the bat is the Millennium Falcon going into the second Death Star, and it's like this one continuous shot just like following it going in, and I have no idea how they did that. And there's a lot of cool things like that going on. So, original Star Wars movies, really an incredible feat of technology. Enjoyed the story just as much. I'm still bothered by Ewoks. I'm still bothered by the fact that they did a second Death Star in Return of the Jedi, but I think the overall arc for Luke, Leia, Han, Darth Vader, it's all really fantastic, tells a great story, and I love it. So then for the prequels, we decided we're not going to watch the three prequels, but we found someone had done like a no fluff version where they cut out anything that isn't directly related to Anakin, becoming evil. And it's funny because even when you focus the story that much, and it was basically the three prequels boiled down to a 2-hour movie, even then there's a lot of like roll your eyes kinds of moments, especially between Anakin and Padme. There's no reason for them to be a couple. I mean, yes, maybe Anakin should like Padme because everyone has a crush on their older babysitter as a kid, but there's no reason for Padme to be interested in him. And there's like a weird scene where Padme brings Anakin home and her family's like, oh, look, Padme, you brought a boy home. But she's like 26 and he's like 19 or something like that, and or maybe even younger. Maybe he's like 16 or something like that. But if an older woman, especially a senator, brings home a kid that young, I don't think anyone's going to be like, ooh, is he your boyfriend? They're going to be like, oh, you tutoring this kid? Are you babysitting him? What's up? So, that whole story never holds together. The love story part, and then also Anakin becoming a bad guy, where at one moment he's kind of like, oh man, well yeah, where at one moment he's like, oh, the Chancellor is a Sith. Oh my God, I gotta tell everyone. Okay guys, we gotta stop him. And then somehow makes the leap to kind of accidentally killing Mace Windu, and then just like 3 minutes later feeling totally comfortable murdering a bunch of innocent children in the name of wiping out the Jedi. So his turn to evil doesn't really work, and you can tell a story about someone becoming evil. Breaking Bad did it really well. Mind you, it had a lot more time to do it, but you can make those turns believable. You can show someone who has good intentions, really does think he's doing what's right, become a horrible, evil person. And the prequels just didn't do it. But the no-fluff version kind of just gave us that story in broad strokes, just almost as a reminder more than anything. Now, Force Awakens, getting into it. Liz and I really enjoyed it. We enjoyed it a lot. It really did feel like things were back on track. Like, this felt like a palate cleanser. The movie got a lot of criticism for, basically being a rehash of A New Hope. And it's funny because you got these movies coming out right now like Creed and Jurassic World, which kind of follow very much the same beats of the original movies that everyone loves. And in this case, I don't think it's that bad because unlike Jurassic World didn't, even though it followed the same beats as Jurassic Park, it didn't feel like a Jurassic Park movie. It felt oversaturated, very superhero-esque. None of the characters were nearly as memorable as any of the ones in the original movie. And it was fun, but it didn't feel like a Jurassic Park movie. I haven't seen Creed, so I can't comment on that versus the original Rocky, but this felt like Star Wars, and the new characters are all perfectly well drawn. They're all characters that I'm interested in. I care about them. I want to see where their story goes, and they weren't overshadowed by the returning cast, which is really a fantastic testament to the script. And I know how many iterations, Michael Lawrence and J.J. Abrams and Lawrence Kasdan went through trying to make that work, and I think they deserve a hearty round of applause for pulling that off. Because, I know at one point, like, Luke played a bigger role in the story. By the way, I'm going to spoil everything, so don't watch this if you haven't seen the movie. I know in the original version of the story, Luke played a much bigger role, and there's this problem where whenever Luke was on screen, all you wanted to know was what he was up to, and then when you'd ever cut to someone else, you'd be like, well, I want to see what Luke's doing. So it made a lot of sense to hold him till the end. I'm not bothered by the fact that they hit a lot of the same kind of plot beats as the original story because it still felt like its own thing. The characters feel distinct enough from the original cast that, I'm happy to follow their story. And in many ways, this felt like a palate cleanser. It was kind of a way to have everyone be like, okay, look, everyone, we're just kind of resetting the tone. We want to make sure everyone's on the same page. And then I would be very, very surprised if Rian Johnson's Episode 8 feels anything like Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi. My only big guff with Episode 7 here is another Death Star. Really, okay, I know it's not a Death Star. It's way bigger, and it can kill 5 planets at once. But bigger doesn't mean better. I think the prequels go to show that really well. A robot twirling 6 lightsabers is not better than a one-on-one lightsaber fight, that kind of thing. And I don't think that added much to the story to have just another giant weapon that needed to be broken down. Also, it made the New Republic, so the state of the Empire, the state of the galaxy was not very well explained. Doing some research, I understand now that the rebels did ultimately win on a big Jakku battle, and then they took over and formed the New Republic, which is kind of like the Republic that we see in the prequels. And then all the Nazis, the Galactic Empire, they kind of fled to this other area, and they become the First Order and start rebuilding power again. But I guess the New Republic doesn't really care or worry about them. They're like, they're just doing something over there. We don't have to worry about them. But they give Princess Leia, or General Leia, a chance to form a resistance against them. Resistance is really misleading because that implies that they're going against the current government, but they're not. They're kind of supported by the current government. But then to be like, okay, if you guys really think they're a problem, you can go bother them. But they've got this enormous cache of resources being funneled to them, and it seems like a pretty substantial army, considering that the battle that takes place is right up there with, like, the final battle in Return of the Jedi in terms of, number of ships and all that. So it's kind of like if America knew that there were a bunch of Nazis hanging out in Argentina, and those Nazis were building giant nuclear weapons, and we were like, oh, don't worry about them, they don't have any power, blah, blah, blah. So it makes the New Republic seem like real idiots to not take the threat of the First Order seriously. And here's the thing, I don't think that we needed this whole new weapon thing. I was interested in the title crawl thing. Luke Skywalker is missing. I was interested in a fun little adventure romp going from place to place, finding more clues about Luke's whereabouts, and eventually having the satisfying payoff at the end of the movie where you found him. Instead, that got totally sidetracked. We have, this one piece of a map that needs to get over to the Resistance, and we have the full map, which R2-D2, in a very Deus Ex Machina way, decided to just show at the end. And so it was just really those two pieces. You have a piece of the map, and then you have it being inserted into the rest of a map, and then they find Luke. And I think that was kind of a missed opportunity, because the whole idea of another Death Star thing is not that interesting. Yes, it allowed for interesting things to happen. I really like the whole, everything going on with Han and Leia and their son. I think Adam Driver, who, you know, I'm very familiar with through Girls, is really fantastic as Kylo Ren. I think he's an interesting villain. I love the idea of someone being seduced or tempted by the light side and trying to stay on the dark side. That's a really cool, potent idea. Before I forget, CG bothered me a little bit. I don't think there's any reason Supreme Emperor Snoke, as much as I love Andy Serkis, I don't think he had to be a CG character. And yes, we've got performance capture going on, which is wonderful, but he could have just been a guy in prosthetics, and I think that would have been better, more believable. I like that they, you know, for guys like Admiral Akbar, I'm really glad that they didn't do like a fully animated CG fish head. Like, they still just have the flapping mouth, and that's good, because that's what we remember from Return of the Jedi. And yes, it's not super precise with, you know, forming words and all that, but it still feels like a real character, and I'd rather have something feel substantial and real and physically there, because CG just isn't ever going to replace real things. And I say that as someone who loves CG, someone who thinks Gollum is one of the greatest characters of all time, and yet almost all the characters in The Hobbit were totally forgettable because, well, not because they were all CG, but a lot of the CG ones, especially Azog the Defiler or whatever, very forgettable. So I wish there was less CG. Let's be clear though. Daisy Ridley, John Boyega, Oscar Isaac, all these guys, fantastic. Their characters are established so quickly. There's a real wonderful sense of humor in this movie. Spectre, I was a little bothered because it was a funny movie, but in kind of like a slapsticky way that didn't feel like James Bond. In here, the humor really feels organic. It feels like it's coming from the characters. It's great in the moment. I love, you know, Oscar Isaac's introduction, the whole like, who's going to talk first? Am I going to talk first? Are you going to talk first? Oh, you're talking now. Wow, really hard to understand you with that mask on. What can we do something about that mask? Really fun stuff like that. And then I love Harrison Ford, who, you know, is the skeptic in the original 3 movies. He doesn't believe in the Force, and then here he is, you know, in the Millennium Falcon, standing like 3 feet away from where, and he's like, it's a bunch of hoopla. And now being like, no, it's all real. Yeah, and then also being the expert, where, you know, John Boyega's character is like, oh yeah, well, I know how we'll get in. We'll use the Force. And Harrison Ford getting this great line delivery of, that's not how the Force works, because he's the expert now. If I'm being nitpicky, I kind of wish there was a little bit more of a sense of what his relationship was with his son. I know Star Wars doesn't do flashbacks, and I don't even think that would have been the best way to do it, but I wish there was a little bit more definition of what that relationship was and how it's changed, because I think that final scene, as much as it's telegraphed and becomes really, really obvious 3 minutes before it happens, you know, what Adam Driver is going to do. Father, I need you to help me. Can you help me with this thing? Yes, son, anything. It's really hard. I don't think I can do it, but I know I have to. You can do it, son. Come on, I'm here for you. Good, dead. It's a powerful scene. I actually think it works very well. I think it would have worked a little better if we knew a little bit more about that relationship. Another thing, and Liz brought this up, and I really agree with this, I don't think Adam Driver should have had the mask off so much. I think there should have been a very clear distinction between, like, when I have the mask on, I'm in this kind of like badass Sith mode that I'm trying to convince myself, you know, like, okay, I'm in this, crazy general soldier mode. And then when I take it off, it's very rare and really just for humane moments. I don't think he should have taken it off when hanging out with Daisy. Very easy to eliminate that. Just have her not give that weird line about like, yeah, well, it's pretty easy to hate someone when they're a creature in a mask chasing you around. Remove that, have him keep the mask on, keep all that very formal. Then have him take the mask off for Han, let that be the first time we see his face, make that his only real human moment, and then back when he's in the forest fighting with Daisy, put the mask on. The wall's back up, his armor's back on, and now he's, you know, back in that mode. I think that would have been better for his character. Nitpicky though, lightsaber stuff was cool. I do wish Daisy's fighting style was a little bit more like the way she used her bow, because otherwise, I know people have been criticizing Daisy a little bit as being a Mary Sue. I don't really agree with that. I find it totally believable that she's as good at all the things as she is, and it fits very well in line with, you know, Luke becoming very good with all sorts of random things. But yeah, it would have been nice when she's using the lightsaber, since she's not trained in sword fighting, if she would have just used it a little bit more like a bow. You know, maybe she even used two hands or something. I don't know. That would have been cool and would have allowed for some alternate fighting styles. I don't know why she kept doing this kind of stabbing thing, although I guess maybe she did that with the bow. Anyway, I'm being super nitpicky. I enjoyed the movies a lot. The movies so far, we're really looking forward to the next one, including Rogue One. I mean, that can be fun too. Really excited for Rian Johnson, who I met very briefly back during a Joseph Gordon-Levitt hit record thing. I had no idea who he was at the time. I was like, hey man, what do you do, movies or something? He's like, yeah, I'm a bit of a filmmaker. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Can I find your stuff on like YouTube? I didn't say that, but yeah, I had no idea who he was. And now, you know, years later, he's directed some of the best episodes of Breaking Bad. He made Looper, he made Brick, he made The Brothers Bloom, and now he's making the new Star Wars movie. So good for him. He's a super sweet guy. I wish him all the luck in the world, and I think he's going to do a great job. Any other Star Wars thoughts? I'm thinking, by the time the third one, or the eighth one comes out, this little guy is going to be like 3 or 4 years old. Can we take him to the movies then? I don't know. I don't know if you can take kids that young to the movies. You might get scared. Who knows? But yeah, I feel like the future is bright. Because there's so many Star Wars movies coming out over the next few years, there is a danger of oversaturation. There's a danger of getting sick of it, you know. But for now, yay! Star Wars is back, and I love that universe. I love that world. So that's just a smattering of mine and Liz's thoughts about the new Star Wars movie, which we enjoyed very much. I give it a 4-star rating with a confidence of 4. And if you want to see a bunch of the other things that I randomly was thinking about while watching the movie before going off to read reviews and clarifications and that kind of stuff, there's a link to my Google Doc in the About section that just kind of lists all those things. Feel free to comment, add things, whatever. Movies.